Good morning. This is the morning from the New York Times, and I'm Sam Sifton. Today is Wednesday, August 19, 2026. We have a lot to get to: a devastating storm in Hawaii, a stunning political upset in Florida, tariffs paused on Canada, a White House aide who never leaves the president's side, and a $38 sandwich that's worth every penny. But let's start with the storm. Hurricane Lala tore past the Big Island of Hawaii last weekend. It dropped 3 feet of rain in places and left a path of ruins that residents will be working for months to fix. Times journalists reported yesterday from 2 communities on the southern end of the island, and the contrast between their stories tells you something about disaster, how it breaks things open, and how people put them back together. First, Orlando Mayorkas traveled to Ocean View, a remote community of fewer than 5,000 people, where the parking lot of the Ocean View Market gas station has become a spontaneous disaster relief center. The gas station itself was closed. But Tim Reed, an Ocean View resident who runs a low-power radio station that usually plays Hawaiian music and classic rock, had connected his equipment to a satellite. He was broadcasting information about the hub, including his offer to let residents connect to the internet via Starlink and make calls to the outside world. "We're the emergency communication for Ocean View," he told Orlando. Katie Tyner, another resident, had become the gas lady. Orlando found her standing next to her SUV, writing down names and numbers on a clipboard. Her operation was simple and in high demand in a community where many do not own cars. Hand her cash and a fuel can and she would return with gas from an operational station half an hour up the road. There was Pamela Ako, a pastor, handing out water bottles and accepting food and supplies for people who might need them: batteries, rice flour, instant Korean noodles, rope. "It's people helping people," she told Orlando. "This is when we come together as a family. You talk about aloha, you talk about ohana, this is what it's all about." Then Kahi Young rolled up. He had persuaded a local helicopter tour company to bring supplies to another small town, about 25 miles away. The aircraft would arrive soon in a nearby park, and Young needed help loading hundreds of pounds of food and gear. AKO sent him to Reed, who put him on air. Soon volunteers were filling the helicopter with boxes of toilet paper and baby wipes, along with lots of ready-to-eat food. That's one story: aloha and ohana in action, a community improvising its own salvation. But 12 miles east, in the hamlet of Naalehu, Megan Miner Murray found something that might break your heart. Flooding from the storm inundated a small cemetery there, pulling both gravestones and coffins from the earth and leaving behind a sea of mud and wreckage. The scene was chilling. What Megan saw: a body stripped of clothes lay crushed beneath a boulder. About a half-dozen caskets were visible, most empty and torn apart. The smell of the unearthed dead suffused parts of the debris field. Flotsam was everywhere: refrigerators in the mud, clothes, a sodden mattress, a hammer. Families searched the site, looking for the graves of their loved ones. Maka Gollinger came with 8 of her relatives. "We're going to find my mom," she told Megan. "We got to know. We've got to take care of our family bones." All was not horror, though. Gollinger's mother's grave, at least, was untouched. "Here she is," Gollinger said when she found it. "All right, Mom. We're just checking." 2 communities, 12 miles apart. One organizing helicopter supply runs from a gas station parking lot. The other searching a muddy cemetery for the bones of their ancestors. Both, in their way, about ohana, about family, and what you owe each other when the world falls apart. From Hawaii, we turn to Florida, where the left scored another upset last night. State Representative Angie Nixon of Jacksonville, a progressive firebrand who ran an underdog campaign, won the Democratic nomination for Senate in a shocking upset. She defeated Alex Weinman, a former national security official who was a top witness in President Trump's first impeachment trial. His entry was largely welcomed by Democratic Party leaders hoping to make Florida, which leans right, at least competitive this fall. Mr. Weinman far outraised Ms. Nixon more than 16 times as much campaign money and was the clear front-runner. But there was no public polling in the race, and Ms. Nixon harnessed the enthusiasm of grassroots Democrats to beat a much better-funded moderate. The question now: can it carry her to victory in November against Republican incumbent Rick Scott? In the governor's race, Byron Donalds, a Trump-backed congressman, will face David Jolly, a Republican-turned-Democrat and vocal Trump critic. Donalds, a 3-term congressman, endorsed President Trump over his own governor, Ron DeSantis, and the payoff has been huge. He stood out early, a black conservative in an overwhelmingly white and wealthy community, at a Tea Party protest in Naples back in 2010, railing against what he called the excesses of liberal politics. His involvement in the insurgent right-wing movement eventually propelled him to Congress, and now to the Republican nomination for governor. If he wins in November, he'll become Florida's first black governor. Representative Corey Mills, who faced allegations of assault and threatening behavior toward women and is under investigation by the House Ethics Committee, lost his Republican primary to Ryan Elijah, a former local Fox television news anchor. The race had divided Republicans. President Trump endorsed Mills in February, but Representatives Anna Paulina Luna and Mike Haradopoulos of Florida more recently backed Elijah. More politics. In South Carolina, at the only debate in the runoff Senate primary, Senator Darlene Graham stumbled over a question about the importance of Taiwan to U.S. interests, saying she was not that informed on national security. The awkward moment, which prompted boos from the audience, underscored her biggest vulnerability in the race to succeed her brother, the late Lindsey Graham. Ms. Graham has the full support of President Trump, but she lacks the experience of her opponent, Representative Ralph Norman. A strategy firm called Median Strategies admitted it fabricated recent election polls in Wisconsin and California as a social experiment to see how misinformation spreads. One of their surveys claimed that Francesca Hahn was leading the Wisconsin Democratic primary for governor by more than 20 percentage points. She went on to lose by less than 1 percentage point. Another, shared by Mayor Karen Bass on X in a since-deleted post, showed Ms. Bass leading Nithya Raman by nearly 12 percentage points. The firm withdrew the results, saying the polls were intended to expose how quickly false information could spread. And Google quietly rolled out a new program on Monday that will allow candidates, political parties, and political action committees to more easily bypass Gmail spam filter and send fundraising appeals to the inboxes of the company's many millions of email users. The change comes after years of complaints from Republicans that Gmail spam algorithm unfairly blocked their committee's emails more than those of their Democratic counterparts, although those complaints were dismissed in court. Now to the Trump administration. Natalie Harp, the 35-year-old West Wing aide, is always by the president's side. She never takes a day off, not even on Sunday. She works out of the Oval Office and she's got a regular seat on Marine One. She texts with world leaders on the president's behalf. She stays up late with him drafting social media posts. She rarely speaks on camera, and yet she is never not there, ever present with a wide smile and her eyes fixed on the president. She is the utmost gatekeeper to President Trump, a one-woman conduit of information operating entirely outside the usual chain of command. The public knows almost nothing about what she actually does, but Sean McCreesh and Maggie Haberman report that she functions as a kind of chief of staff without the title, managing access, shaping the president's information diet, and executing his wishes with a devotion that veterans of the West Wing find unusual even by Trump world standards. ABC sued the Federal Communications Commission on Tuesday, accusing the agency of violating the First Amendment in its efforts to possibly strip the network's local broadcasting licenses. The company asked a federal court to stop the FCC from pursuing the regulatory moves, which the network said posed an existential threat to its operations. The lawsuit, filed in federal court in Washington, was a rare example of a major media organization suing the Trump administration over its unrelenting campaign to punish the national press through lawsuits, reporting restrictions, and regulatory pressure. Peter Baker writes that Trump's attack thy friends, befriend thy enemies approach to international relations has become the feature, not the bug, of U.S. foreign policy. Once again, the president is threatening his country's own partners with everything from tariffs to bombs. Once again, he is fawning over a nuclear-armed tyrant deemed to be one of the biggest dangers to U.S. security. And once again, the world is left trying to make sense of a United States that has upended the world order that it established 8 decades ago. Nearly 10 years after Mr. Trump first came to the White House on the slogan America First, the pattern is so familiar it has lost its power to shock, but not its power to destabilize. Speaking of tariffs, President Trump announced a delay on imposing 50% tariffs on Canada in a social media post on Tuesday night, roughly 90 minutes before the midnight deadline. The White House issued a proclamation saying Canada had agreed to make certain concessions, though Prime Minister Mark Carney was less definitive about what the intense talks produced, saying only that important work remained. Canada got a 3-day reprieve on damaging new American tariffs against billions of dollars worth of goods, with Trump claiming that a deal was close. In the Middle East, Israel carried out airstrikes on a defunct military airbase in northwestern Syria on Tuesday, prompting the United States to condemn the attack as a threat to regional stability in the latest outburst of American frustration with Israel. 8 airstrikes hit the Abu al-Duwar military airbase in Idlib, a city about 40 miles from the border with Turkey, according to Syrian state media, and did not cause any casualties. The Trump administration has been a vocal proponent of Syria's new government led by President Ahmed al-Shara, and the U.S. Special Envoy for Syria had warned Israel against such strikes. On Iran, Stephen Erlanger reports that Iran has survived harsh U.S. sanctions since 1979 and is betting it can endure even more. In the 47 years since the Islamic Revolution, the United States has taken step after step to isolate the country, with only a brief reprieve after the 2015 Iran nuclear deal, which President Trump excoriated and abandoned in 2018. Mr. Trump promised maximum pressure then, and now, with limited military options, threatens even more. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent warned last week of never-before-seen measures. But analysts say Iran is unlikely to cave to additional U.S. economic pressure. Faced with more, it is likely to escalate rather than surrender. In Ukraine, the popular former defense minister Mikhailo Fedorov has called for wartime elections, setting up a potential confrontation with President Volodymyr Zelensky, the man who fired him last month. After Russia invaded in February 2022, elections in Ukraine were suspended under martial law. Opposing political parties and some Ukrainians have grumbled about Mr. Zelensky's hold on power, which has extended for more than 7 years, but rallied behind him because of the war. The first major crack in that largely unified front appeared on Tuesday evening, when Fedorov, a popular young leader, said Russia should not be allowed to dictate when Ukrainians can choose their next government. Liberia agreed to take up to 1,200 deportees from the United States in the next year, one of the largest known deals that the Trump administration has struck to send migrants to countries where they often have no ties. The first group of 20 deportees is expected to arrive in Liberia on Thursday. The announcement comes as the Trump administration has said it wants to send to Liberia the Salvadoran immigrant Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia, who was wrongfully deported to El Salvador earlier this year and whose case has drawn international attention. Now the economy. The yield on the 30-year U.S. Treasury bond rose on Tuesday to 5.3%, its highest level since 2007. Similar bonds in Canada, Japan, Germany and elsewhere also traded at their highest yields in at least a decade. Investor angst over stubborn inflation, unsustainable government deficits and rampant spending on artificial intelligence helped send borrowing costs to multi-year highs across the world this week. The yields help determine interest rates for corporate debt and consumer loans, like mortgages. Wall Street has figured out how to invest in and profit from personal injury lawsuits. The Times found that litigation funding companies are pouring money into cases like that of Danny Anguisaka Morales, who was repairing a church facade in Manhattan when he appeared to fall. Security footage shows him climbing a few rungs up a ladder, leaning to his left, then dropping to the scaffolding below. He filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, saying he had severe injuries and PTSD and could no longer work. Personal injury cases have exploded in number and magnitude, funded by companies betting on big payouts, and those companies are increasingly backed by hedge funds and institutional investors looking for uncorrelated returns. And a terrifying vulnerability in the U.S. power grid, it relies on thousands of aging, hand-built transformers. If enough of them fail or are taken out simultaneously, the resulting blackout could last years. Christopher Cox traveled to California and Nevada and interviewed more than 24 experts in grid technologies and grid reliability. He opens with the Metcalf substation attack in 2013, where snipers shot up 17 transformers in a coordinated assault that took 27 days to repair, and that was just one substation. The transformers are custom-built, weigh hundreds of tons, and take months or years to replace. There are few spares. A coordinated attack on multiple substations, or a severe solar storm, or simply the cumulative failure of aging equipment, could plunge vast regions into darkness for years. Other big stories: Harvard agreed to pay $53 million to settle claims that body parts donated for research were stolen and sold by a former manager of the university's medical school morgue. The former manager, Cedric Lodge, 58, was sentenced to 8 years in prison in December after pleading guilty to one count of interstate transportation of stolen goods. The university fired him in 2023. Mr. Lodge had been entrusted with handling cadavers that were part of the Harvard Medical School's anatomical gift program and were supposed to be cremated or returned to families. Instead, he sold them heads, brains, skin, bones to buyers across the country. Pennsylvania's Attorney General charged 13 current and former Penn State students with trafficking cocaine out of fraternity houses. 6 of the defendants are current students. 4 face charges of felony corrupt organizations and conspiracy, among other offenses, while a 5th is charged with felony conspiracy and other crimes. 8 others were charged with misdemeanor offenses like possession. The operation involved packaging the drug at fraternity houses and distributing it to students. Time for the morning quiz. Underneath a defunct brewery in Belgium, construction workers recently discovered the bones of Gerardus Mercator? $10 million in gold bars and coins? 3 tons of French fries buried as a piece of performance art in 2015? Or records of forced labor in the Belgian Congo hidden by King Leopold II? The answer: $10 million in gold bars and coins. When the police chief learned what workers had found, sealed inside a small brick cellar as they drilled below a defunct brewery in Dendermonde, he was sure someone had interrupted his Tuesday meeting with a prank. "I thought it was a joke," said the chief, Patrick Faze, "because things like that normally don't happen in real life." But the workers had plenty of proof: 49 gold bars and more than 4,000 gleaming coins, a cache worth an estimated $10 million, its origin and fate unknown. Opinions. Brett Stevens writes, "Woke 1.0 was crazy," Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez said this month, quoting a far-left New York City councilman. Given the congresswoman's own record, she previously insisted that some groups have no choice but to riot, called for defunding the police and prison abolition, and used the demeaning term menstruating person to describe a woman. The crazy that she speaks of was also her own. Good for AOC for acknowledging mistakes. Now can we have some accountability for the vast damage that Woke 1.0 did, not to mention the damage that Woke 2.0 continues to do? Christine Emba argues that modern social clubs, exercise cults and startups that offer to find your people won't solve the loneliness epidemic on their own. "Why do I feel like I'm being sold friends?" she asks. Join a modern social club, one it beckons. Turn strangers into friends via curated dinner parties at trendy restaurants. A luxury condo building flogs its community clubhouse as an exciting amenity, while yet another social startup informs her, rather ominously, that "we find your people." The sheer number of these ads suggests that the need for friendship is being commodified, but friendship, she writes, cannot be optimized. Morning reads. Amy X. Wang wrote an article for The Times about voice-to-text apps, using a voice-to-text app. "It's hilarious. I wish I could describe elegantly how much I hate it with some kind of handy, clever metaphor," she said, "but that kind of creativity comes to me through writing with my hands." She dictated the whole column using an app called Whisper Flow, and the experience was equal parts magical and maddening. Everything looked like me. Mina Geltink and Minal Tijan were adopted from India by families in the Netherlands and became friends as teenagers. Years later, they discovered they were sisters. One evening this spring, Mina put her youngest child to bed and sat down on the couch with her partner, ready to have a cup of tea. Then she saw a Facebook message from Minal. "Do you remember me?" It had been 15 years. Minal had included a screenshot from the genealogy website MyHeritage and asked whether Mina had also received a notification. They had the same biological mother. Working-class lit, Chinese gig workers and factory laborers are turning stories from their tedious, low-paid jobs into bestsellers. Wang Jiabing, a food delivery driver, measures time by the number of jobs he completes instead of by the passing of the seasons. He toils in cities across China to send money back to his family, but has been away for so long that his son calls him that man instead of dad. This literary genre has ballooned in popularity in recent years, as many Chinese have grown pessimistic about the economy and their place in it. Drummer Frank Beard, the only beardless member of ZZ Top, propelled the band's blend of boogie, southern rock and blues for more than a half-century. He died at 77 on Monday at his ranch in Richmond, Texas. Today, Elwood and I lost a great friend and collaborator, his bandmate Billy Gibbons wrote on Facebook, referring to Elwood Francis, ZZ Top's bassist since 2021, and the world lost one of the most naturally innovative drummers and a great and true son of Texas. His signature backbeat was key to keeping the band's sound tight and swinging for decades. Today's number, $38. That is the cost of the brisket sandwich at Yerord Mas Bakery in Delhi, an Armenian restaurant in a strip mall in Los Angeles. "It is magnificent," writes our critic Tejal Rao, "and controversy over its price is misguided. Want to try and guess which restaurant served me a small and profoundly forgettable dish the other night for this exact price? It's impossible because there are so many offenders peddling mid-pastas and roast chicken." Arthur Gregorian's Next Generation Armenian Cooking is the kind of food that makes Los Angeles special. The brisket is cured for a week, smoked for 14 hours, sliced thick and served on house-baked bread with pickled vegetables and a schmear of labna. Recipe of the day: Kevin Pang's sesame soy chicken with ginger scallion noodles. I love this recipe in part because you don't need to make it with chicken, nor with noodles. As long as you have the ginger scallion sauce as a keystone, you'll be eating well. Last night's attempt had me serving it over rice and a fried egg, with dried seaweed flakes and a flash of soy sauce. Man, it's good with the chicken and noodles, though. Awards season. The actor Coleman Domingo stopped by the Times' newsroom the other day to talk about his twin Emmy nominations for Euphoria and The Four Seasons. He's stoked. For a boy who comes from the inner city of West Philadelphia, who had no access into this whole industry, who's been in this for over 30 years, he said, for me to get to the Emmy stage, even to get to a nomination, is just extraordinary. In Euphoria, he plays Ollie, a recovering addict who becomes a mentor to Rue. In The Four Seasons, he plays a man whose marriage is unraveling. Two very different characters, Oracle and Angel of Vengeance, as one critic put it. More on culture. Caitlin Simmers, a champion surfer and favorite for the 2028 Olympics, sees her sport as a form of dance. Our critic Gia Corliss writes that she performs with a rare style that is both seamless and fearless as she pushes through waves by dancing on them. Instead of music, she listens to the ocean. For his ballet Andine in 1958, the great British choreographer Frederick Ashton spent hours studying the surge and swell of ocean waves. I wanted the movement to be fluid like the rhythm of the sea rather than the ballet steps, he once said. Simmers embodies that ideal. And is it the summer of the sexual guru? Movies like The Invite, I Watch Your Sex and Teenage Sex and Death at Camp Miasma sure seem to make the case. Each features a charismatic figure who guides younger characters through sexual awakening, sometimes tenderly, sometimes exploitatively, always with a sense that sex is something to be taught, not just discovered. The Morning recommends, help your kids manage their screen time, help yourself, too, with advice from the tech-savvy parental units at Wirecutter. Read No Orchids for Miss Blandish, a hard-boiled crime novel by James Hadley Chase about the kidnapping of a wealthy heiress, published in 1939. It's worth tracking down. The sentences sing, Bailey was feeling lousy. Hard liquor and heat don't mix. His mouth felt like a birdcage and his eyes were gritty. And eat carrots. They really are good for your eyes. Games, here is today's spelling bee. Yesterday's pangrams were headbang and headbanged. And here are today's mini crossword, Wordle, connections, crossplay, and strands. Thanks for spending part of your morning with the Times and me. See you tomorrow. Sam.